Wherever the majestic music of motor racing can be heard, through the sweeping high-speed curves of Spa, past the sunlit terraces of Monaco, high on the Monza banking, down the historic ribbon of road that is Reims, through the flat, wide-open space of Silverstone, or winding round the unrelenting Nürburgring. One man stands out, cool and calm amid a split-second world where time is told in tenths. Fangio. Born in the little village of Balcarce in the Argentine on the 24th of June 1911, the fourth of a family of 6 born to Loreto and Herminia Fangio, no man has given more to the essentially 20th century art of motor racing than has the incomparable Juan Manuel Fangio, 5 times champion driver of the world. Fangio graced his world champion title with a gentle, unassuming charm that endeared him to all. In his rise to fame, he was aided immeasurably by the loyalty and constant encouragement of his wife and trainer. At the age of 11, the young Fangio went to work in a garage. In 1928, at the age of 17, he rode as a mechanic in a race for Model T Fords. And in 1934, he drove the first race of his fabulous career. His first appearance upon the European scene was at Reims in 1948, at the wheel of a Simca Gordini, but he failed to finish. In 1949, he returned and began his meteoric rise to fame by winning the opening race of the European season, the Sanremo Grand Prix on Maserati. Other successes quickly followed on Simca and Ferrari as well as Maserati. In all, he won 7 races that year to share the season's honors with Villoresi and the young Alberto Ascari, each of whom also scored 7 victories. In 1950, Fangio joined Alfa Romeo, and at Monaco, he set off to score one of his 8 victories that year. A 9-car pileup on the first lap cut the field by half, but Fangio, the rising star, came through to win, and this, incidentally, at the age of 39, when many drivers think of retiring. Royal Silverstone, the Grand Prix d'Europe 1950, was attended by their Majesties and provided British enthusiasts with their first sight of Fangio and the invincible Alphas, who finished 1, 2, 3 despite Fangio's retirement with 8 laps to go. In 1951, Fangio became, for the first time, champion driver of the world. The British Grand Prix that year marked a turning point in motor racing history when, for the first time, the Alphas were defeated by Ferrari. In a tremendous drive, Gonzalez on Ferrari countered every effort of his compatriot Fangio, who gave a superlative display of driving on a circuit unsuited to the Alfa Romeo. (1952), and we find Fangio competing in the Monza Grand Prix. Alfa Romeo had withdrawn from Grand Prix racing, so Fangio signed with BRM. But the BRMs failed to finish at Albi and Andrade, and a disappointed Fangio flew from Ulster to Italy to drive a Maserati in this race. Fangio, the reigning champion, joins battle with Ascari, his successor, and Farina, his predecessor, on Ferraris, but the battle is brief. Tired by his flight and his 3rd motor race in 8 days, Fangio crashed at Lesmo soon after the start, sustaining injuries that were to keep him out of motor racing for the rest of the year, his only accident in 10 years of European racing. Returning in 1953, Fangio drove one of the greatest races of his career in the classic Mille Miglia, a race in which he had finished 3rd in 1950. Despite his avowed dislike of sports car racing, Fangio, driving an Alfa Romeo, lay 5th at Ravenna, 4th at Pescara, 2nd at Rome, and at Siena and Florence he led the race. When the Alphas of Kling, Farina and Sanesi retired, Fangio alone withstood the Ferrari challenge, but a broken track rod mounting left him with steering on one wheel only. Still, he drove with that implacable will to win so typical of the man, averaging 100 miles an hour on the final section from Bologna to Brescia. But to no avail. Mazzola's 4.1-litre Ferrari took the lead at Bologna to beat the crippled Alfa to the finish by nearly 11 minutes. Seven times was Fangio second in 1953, although he did win the second heat at Albi at 110.48 miles an hour in the BRM, for which mark he drove when not engaged with Maserati. From the sunshine of Albi to that of Reims, for the start of the Grand Prix of the ACF. 5 Maseratis, led by Fangio, fought the 4 Ferraris of Ascari, Farina, Villoresi and Hawthorn. But by half distance, 2 cars only mattered, Fangio and Hawthorn. Nose to tail, side by side, at 150 miles an hour. First one, then the other led. And after 300 miles of motor racing, Hawthorn beat Fangio by a single second. Hawthorn's victory was prophetic. But 2 weeks later, the British Grand Prix at Silverstone is led from start to finish by Alberto Ascari on Ferrari. Fangio, backed by his fellow countrymen Gonzalez and Marimon, lies second for Maserati, but lacks the speed to catch the leader, although he overhauls Hawthorn, who defeated him at Reims, and who was taking things rather gently after his monumental spin here on the second lap. At Monza, with Ferrari and Maserati evenly matched, the Italian Grand Prix produced some magnificent motor racing. Ascari and Farina on Ferrari, Fangio and Marimon on Maserati were never more than 3 seconds apart for over half the race. Then Marimon made a pit stop, and the 3 world champions, Ascari, Farina and Fangio, raced 1, 2, 3, until the last sensational lap, when Ascari spun, Farina swerved to avoid him, and Fangio somehow found a gap to win his first major Grand Prix of the year, just 1.4 seconds ahead of Farina. This sensational victory changed his luck, and he won the Modena Grand Prix and the Supercorta Maggiore race before rounding off his season in Mexico to drive for Lancia in the Pan American Road Race. Run in 8 stages, totaling 1,900 miles, Fangio won again. But his joy was marred by the death of his teammate Pozzetto, to whose memory he publicly dedicated his victory. 1954 marked the return to Grand Prix racing of Mercedes-Benz on the occasion of the French Grand Prix. It also saw a new Formula One in operation, 2.5 litres unsupercharged. The 8-cylinder Mercedes looked strange with their all-enveloping bodies, but were ideally suited to the Reims circuit. Fangio, already winner of the Argentine and Belgian Grand Prix on Maserati, now led the Mercedes team with Kling and Hermann. From the very start, Fangio and Kling surged into a lead they were never to lose, setting a race average of just on 120 miles an hour to demolish and demoralize the Ferrari and Maserati opposition, as one by one the 22 starters were reduced to just 5 cars, led over the finishing line by Fangio at 115.67 miles an hour, his 3rd victory in 1954. At Nürburgring, the pattern is repeated, but victory in the German Grand Prix had a hollow ring. A sad, unsmiling Fangio accepts the trappings of victory, but mourns the loss of his young friend and protégé, Onofre Marimon, who, driving a Maserati, was killed in practice for the race. In the Swiss Grand Prix, yet another victory fell to the invincible combination of Fangio and Mercedes-Benz. At Monza too, Fangio wins, and with it, his 2nd World Championship title. At the Mercedes-Benz works at Stuttgart, the factory is en fête, to do honor to the world champion whose 6 Grand Prix wins during the year underlined his mastery and his utter determination. Without him, the German team's successes would have been far fewer. For 1955, the team is further strengthened by Britain's #1 driver Stirling Moss, and the two fastest drivers drive the world's fastest car round the tree-lined circuit of Spa. The master takes La Source, the pupil close behind him. And so they finished first and second in the Belgian Grand Prix, one of the 6 championship events in Europe, of which Mercedes won 5. The Grand Prix of the Argentine, Britain, Belgium, Holland, and finally the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, where Fangio is once again acclaimed for the 3rd time champion driver of the world. In 1956, Fangio drives for Ferrari with his young teammates Castellotti and Collins, faced by a rising generation of opponents. Moss on Maserati, Hawthorne on BRM, and Brooks, also on BRM, cannot prevent the now 45-year-old Fangio from winning the British Grand Prix at his 5th attempt. At Nürburgring, too, Fangio demonstrates his mastery of a young man's sport. Through the twisting, turning Nürburgring, he gives a magnificent display of Grand Prix driving to show the younger stars that he still possesses the incomparable qualities for which motor racing calls. And so one more Grand Prix falls to the man whose courage and skill have become a legend. In fact, there seemed to be no way to stop Fangio winning motor races, but out in Cuba they managed it. They kidnapped him. However, not even being kidnapped and held until too late to race disturbed the calm serenity of Fangio, now champion driver of the world for the 4th time. In 1957, for his last full season in motor racing, Fangio returned to Maserati, the marque with which he had started his rise to fame. And at Modena Autodrome, he tests the car. Over the years, the racing car has changed, and the necessity for the sensitive and precise handling of the faster, lighter Grand Prix cars of the post-war era emphasized the need for a more subtle and controlled driving technique. Fangio, with his iron self-control and uncanny skill, met this demand with contemptuous ease, to set a style that raised the art of racing driving to the height of a new science. 20 years earlier, in 1937, that great French driver Jean-Pierre Vimille, then at the height of his fame, said of Fangio, "I have seen at Buenos Aires a brilliant new driver. The day he has a real racing car to drive, he will perform miracles." The truth of that old prophecy is here for us to see. After winning the Argentine Grand Prix for the 4th successive year, Fangio returns to Monaco to repeat his success of 7 years ago. As then, a multiple crash adds to the excitement of the race, when in the opening laps, the exuberance of that youthful trio, Hawthorne, Moss and Collins, leaves the field clear for a man old enough to be their father. With Brooks on the van wall too far back to catch him, Fangio wins once again. But the greatest race of Fangio's career was yet to come, the German Grand Prix of 1957. Race day was warm and dry as the cars assembled on the grid. Fangio on Maserati, Moss on Van Wall, Collins and Hawthorne on Ferrari amongst an impressive field. Into the south turn, the Ferraris of Hawthorne and Collins lead Fangio's Maserati. But after 3 laps, Fangio leads by 5 seconds. And with 12 laps gone, his lead is 28 seconds over the 2 Ferraris as he pulls into the pits to take on fuel and change the rear wheels. A 52-second pit stop puts him 3/4 of a minute behind Hawthorne and Collins, whose cars can go through the race non-stop. 10 laps to go and 45 seconds to pick up. Fangio begins the race of his life. For 3 laps, he makes no headway. But on lap 16, the gap is down to 33 seconds. On lap 19 to 13.5. On lap 20, Hawthorne and Collins scream past the pits, straining every nerve, with Fangio snapping at their heels. Into the south turn, and he's closer still. Into the north turn, and the fantastic Fangio takes Collins on the inside, and with a lap and a half to go, he leads the race, a race in which he broke the lap record 10 times in 22 laps, reducing it from 9 minutes 37.4 seconds to 9 minutes 17.4, to prove beyond all doubt his claim to immortality as one of the greatest drivers the world has ever known. Acclaimed for the 5th time champion driver of the world, Britain's Guild of Motoring Writers presented him with their Driver of the Year award. In 1958, following the French Grand Prix in which he finished 4th, Fangio laid aside his crash helmet and goggles to retire at the peak of his fame, beloved by all who loved the sport that this quiet and gentle man adorned so well. Before returning to his native Argentine, a visit to the Italian Grand Prix as spectator provided Fangio with the opportunity to bid farewell to his many friends and admirers, among them van wall manufacturer Tony van der Velde, and drivers Tony Brooks, Sterling Moss, Harry Schell, Von Trips and Mike Hawthorne. Such is the regard in which he is held that, under the chairmanship of veteran Louis Chiron, the International Racing Drivers Union made a presentation to Fangio, proudly acclaimed by the royalty of motor racing, still their king, although his reign is ended. Juan Manuel Fangio, who sought and found by dangerous roads a path to perpetuity of fame, will race no more. But on whatever road he travels, he will carry with him always our admiration and our deep affection.